think you got okay.
What's going on? Welcome to Unapologetically Black Male, where we talk about surviving the stigmas, standards, and systems. I want to give a shout out to my co-host EJ Stewart, to our sponsor J Pope and Associates, your a mental health association. Where if you're in need of any counseling, therapy, couples counseling, anything you need, just reach out to J Pope and Associates, and they'll make sure they connect you with the right person to help you with your to help you with the things that you are struggling with at this time. I want to take the time to introduce our guest on today, Dr. Christopher Rogers. I'm going to allow him to kind of give a little bit background about himself, what he does, where he's from, and what particular career path that he's in right now. Then we'll kind of follow up with some questions. So, Dr. Chris, it's on you.
Yeah, thank you, Pete and EJ. Thank you for having me today. It's definitely a pleasure to be with you all on Unapologetic Black Male. Just a little bit about myself. Grew up in West Baltimore, Emerson Village, and went to high school. Actually, prior to high school, I went to a public elementary school, Lyndhurst Elementary School, right up in Emerson Village. Then I went to a couple private middle schools. From there, I went to Dunbar High School, where Pete, yourself, and me, where we went played football together.
Absolutely.
Poet Pride for Dunbar. So I played a little bit of basketball also in my earlier years at Dunbar. So that was a great time in my life. I really enjoyed myself going to Dunbar. I started off kind of studying maybe like a dental assistant type of nursing assistant. Then I kind of was like, you know what? I realized, you know what? I didn't even need one of those certificates to graduate high school. So I just kind of left it alone. And so I just went ahead and made sure I completed high school. From there, I went on to Coppin State University. Man, it took me 7 years to graduate college, but you know, I hung in there and I did what I was supposed to do by making sure I get that education. From there, it was really at the time of Coppin State University where I really learned more about public health. When I grew up, it was all about, you know, being a nurse, being a doctor, lawyer. My mother always worked at Johns Hopkins University, so I kind of knew type work that she did, working around a lot of researchers, but I didn't really know anything about public health. And so it was really during my second stint, because I went to Coppin for 3 years. I took a break, then I went back for another 4 years. It was really during my second stint where I really came to understand this field of public health and become knowledgeable about public health. It was also during that time where I rededicated my life to Christ, right? And so faith is also a big part of who I am. And it was through that rededication of my life to Christ where I really began to really tap into my sense of purpose, like who I am, and realize that, hey, for me, ministry and my secular career are intersected, right? They are one for me. That's not for everybody. Some people, they have their secular job and they also do their ministry thing. For me, it was intertwined. They were like one. And so really became to pray and understand about my purpose. And I found out about this field of public health policy. And I really began to really study exactly what it would take for me to enter that field. And so once I graduated from Coppin, I got my first entry-level job as a community health worker, working in Baltimore City with underserved residents, making sure they have access to social and healthcare services. And I started to, then I went on to get my master's in public health from New York Medical College with a specialization in health policy and management. And it was all kind of during the time when I was coming out of Coppin, transitioning into New York Medical College, where I realized that, hey, in order for me to actually continue to excel and ultimately get where I'm trying to go as far as my career, which is being a black male, right, having a seat at the table, being able to make decisions, being able to drive decisions, being able to be that thought leader when it comes to public health concepts, public health programs, policies, and things like that, I realized that a PhD was going to be key for me in order to continue to progress. And
Mm-hmm.
so being a working being a, at that time I was single father, but I'm now married, happily married, and being a single dad with kids, I needed a program that could fit in with having to work full time, having to take care of my kids, and still having that family support that was necessary. And
Mm-hmm.
so I found Seton Hall University, and so I applied to Seton Hall University for that PhD in health sciences program. I was accepted, and I did my PhD at Seton Hall University in health sciences with a specialization in health professions leadership. And my dissertation there was really focused on how do healthcare providers better provide um, self-management care for older adults who live in underserved communities. And so how can they modify, adjust their workflows, adjust the way that they deliver healthcare to really minister or meet the needs of the older adults in underserved communities. And also during this period of time, that's when I had a dream, I had a vision. I was realizing I was called into ministry, right? I was called to preach the gospel and share the gospel of Jesus Christ with others. My father is an ordained and licensed minister. I have a number of ordained and licensed ministers in my family. So I believe it was just a matter of time before I realized my calling to ministry. And so it was kind of during this time early in my copying years where I was licensed as a minister. And then about, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, actually it was about 2 years ago, I was ordained and I was ordained as a minister. So for me, my faith and my career, they intersect, and they kind of are central to who I am, in addition to my family and me as a father and as husband.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Thank you for sharing that. So I know I want to go back a little bit to like the education break, like how you went for 3 years and then you took a break and went back for the additional time. Like what was the motivating factor for you, like, and what caused you to kind of stop that first time, and what was the motivating factor for you to get back into it?
Yeah, man. Well, I'm that person when people, especially who saw me grow up, meaning adults my mother's age, her friends and things like that, who say, "Wow, I can't believe what God has done with your life." And
Mm-hmm.
so I was that person that was out there cutting up, doing me, you know not taking it seriously, doing my thing while I always did my thing over here, but went to school over here, right?
Gotcha.
Because for me, education, I saw education as the key. And so no matter how many times I had to take anatomy and physiology, right, which I took part one like 3 times. I took part two like 2 times, right? No matter what was going on, I made sure that I was connected with school while I was out there doing my thing. And so and that's really why I took a break, because I was just school wasn't for me at that time. I had 2 more kids. I had my first child when I was 16 in high school. Right,
Wow.
I was in high school. I think I was the first person in my class, or maybe the second person in my class. I think my buddy, I'm not gonna say his name on here, but he had his daughter before me, and then I had my son. He know who he is if he listened to this podcast. I was the second person in our class to have a child in high school when I was 16. So I've been raising kids for so long, and then I had another 2 come along on my 3rd year in college and was cutting up. So I had moved away. It just wasn't. It wasn't. I wasn't serious about it. And
Gotcha.
so it was really during that time where I began to really, again, have that encounter with my faith, right? And have that encounter with the Lord Jesus Christ. And I realized, you know what, man, things ain't working out like they should be. Everything I touch, it seemed like it was failing. And I knew that there had to be a response. And for me, so for me personally, I realized that nothing I do would succeed without humbling myself to the Lord Jesus Christ and making sure I follow him and do what he would have me to do. There are people out here that can be successful without that relationship. That's what they do. But for me personally, my conviction was I need to get right. And so it was during that time that I needed to get right. And I started beginning to making myself, well, not making myself, I began to get right with the Lord, that I begin to realize that I need to go back to school to get my education, because, I wasn't trying to be broke. I wasn't trying to be broke. I wasn't trying to be struggling. I knew that I could contribute to society. I knew that I had this calling. And so for me, education was the key in trying to get back to Coppin. And Coppin was, for me, the HBCU, that was where it was at. Hopkins, I couldn't get into Hopkins. I had the grades for Hopkins. I lived over West Baltimore, so I knew about Coppin. I didn't really know too much about Morgan Towson. That wasn't even on my radar. So all of the other universities in Baltimore, Maryland, UMBC, I couldn't get into none of those schools. All I knew was that I kept a good enough GPA for Coppin where I forget what they term it, but technically I did not have to reapply. So my GPA was like I don't know, man. It was like a 3.0, 3.1. I think I was like 0.1 away from having to actually reapply. And so to Coppin, which would have been a whole nother struggle, because I would have had to taken a test. I had to do the whole thing over again. And so for me, it was like a no-brainer. Let me just re-enroll and just keep going.
Man, you touch on so many different things that make this show what it is, and the purpose is to highlight you and give you the flowers, as they say, man, because for you to have gone through that and persevered, just an undergrad, to then go through a PhD. Because, man, I mean, so many people get to that level and don't finish for such a long time, and you've already had a struggle with finishing undergrad. That's amazing, man, and kudos to you for that, for sure.
I appreciate that. It definitely requires a strong, getting through a PhD program. It requires a strong family support, especially if you have children, you married, you working, wife support, my kids understanding that daddy had to study long nights and had to miss things, traveling back and forth to New Jersey, just really keeping my eye on the end goal, which really, like you all are doing here. You have an end goal to bring this inspiring message, to the world. And so, let's persevere, do what we need to do to make sure that we make that happen. And faith again was also all a part of that, because I can see God's hand guiding me throughout the process, opening up door, giving me favor, introducing me to this person. Relationships, man, is also critical. Was critical to this whole process. Healthy relationships are important to achieving success in this world, because we can't do it by ourselves, right? And nobody, regardless of what you say, nobody want to work with somebody who nasty and mean and can't get along with, right? like if I can't get along with you, I ain't trying to work with you, right? And so I had a good mentor too, who I met at Coppin. He was on the board of regents at Coppin, and he was a black physician executive at a hospital in West Baltimore. I gained favor in his sight. He put me under his wing and also helped to guide me along. But he pulled me in his office one day, and he said, Chris, I hire people for what they know. I fire people for their behavior. And that right there has stuck with me since early in my career, that we can find great people with good technical skills, right? We can find people who know how to edit this video, right? That you all probably want to edit afterwards, right? We know how to find people who can put together a strategic plan. But if somebody is not good to work with, their behavior, they don't know how to act. Like, I ain't trying to work with you. I can go find somebody else who could do the same exact thing who I can get along with. And so relationships has been key, just building the right relationships and knowing how to work with people. We call it emotional intelligence has also
Mhm.
been critical to me being able to be successful in my career and what I do in public health.
Awesome, awesome. As a African American, just kind of achieving the ranks of undergrad and graduate, and then getting your PhD. Like, where would you say you experienced the most kind of like, why is he here, or it's almost like the stigma, like, do you even belong here? Did you come across anything like that where it kind of felt blatant, or just the subtle types of things that we get when we come into a room and they don't expect us to be there?
Yes, I think that has mainly come from, I won't probably say specifically what particular institutional location I've been working in, but it has probably come more so in the middle part of my career.
Mm,
I think now with the doctorate, PhD, and the experience, um, individuals will challenge you professionally. You're
mm,
right. They'll try to dance around the edges, but uh, they, as a PhD, you learn how to defend, because
mhm,
we got to do a defense. So you learn how to really strongly defend your positions with solid reasoning and solid evidence. And so at the level I am at within public health as a public health officer,
mhm,
I'm able to apply that logic, reasoning, and evidence to really drive change. Whereas, I mean, really, you can't really argue with me, right?
mhm,
But we can really come to some type of compromise. So at this point in my career, I spent a lot of time negotiating.
mm,
That's really what I spent a lot of time though, like negotiating the best policy, negotiating the best program to really meet the overall goal that we're trying to achieve as far as health outcomes, et cetera. It's not a really lot of no, you can't do, no,
mhm,
because of your color. No, it's like, how do we negotiate? And me, so in early and middle of my career, people would be like, look at me like, you don't know what you're talking about.
mm,
Right. Like you, like, I don't, it probably was a combination of race, probably was a big factor.
mhm,
I had somebody tell me, like, PhD is like your black card. You just kind of lay it on the table and people have to honor it. But that comes with its responsibilities, and also
mhm,
you have to be wise with it. You can't use it arrogantly. You also have to make sure you prepare before you go in meetings. Make sure you've done your homework. Make sure that you again realize that it's about a calming. For me, it's about a calming good within society that we are trying to achieve, and that we have to share ideas, come to a consensus, and things like that. But I've definitely experienced some pushback, etc., perhaps because I may not have had the level of education such as a PhD, but also being a man of color. I definitely have experienced that. And you just kind of, but the thing about that is that on the other side, not necessarily on the other side, I've always had supervisors who may not look like me who supported me, right?
mm,
And so where they not only supported me, that we both were on the same page as far as what the ultimate outcome is for the program, for the organization, for the initiative. So when I did get that pushback from perhaps someone of the opposite race or ethnicity, I just go back to my supervisor who may or may not look like that individual and say, here's a challenge here's a challenge I'm experiencing, here's the barrier, here's a solution. Oh, by the way, we both agree on this solution. So once my supervisor go tell a person that you said the same thing I just told you, like, why does he or she got to tell you the same thing that
mhm,
I just told you? And you are are having confidence in their response versus me, and I just told you the same thing. That's how you know when you coming up against like
Mhm.
racial bias, etc. When the person who you report to don't look like you, tell a person that you're working with the same thing that you just told them. Like, come on now, that's crazy.
Man, you know, it's been a common theme on this podcast of similar challenges, you know, and you nailed it, man. I mean, immediately I started like D was probably thinking, you know, as a man, you know, finding that balance, because you talked about the emotional intelligence, and physically already we're kind of already working from a place where people, we might be threatening because we're bigger, or we, you know, we don't look like them. And you nailed it, man. You talked about having to navigate that. And you know, where did you find that wherewithal to know how to find that balance and navigate those relationships?
Yeah, I think for me, everything kind of for me drives back to my sense of purpose and belonging, right? Kind of exactly, why am I here, or why am I in this position in this particular season, surrounded by these particular individuals, um, and how does that relate to my overall purpose or direction, or the purpose in which I am striving for, which is ultimately to improve the lives of others, right? And so I kind of dig deep and really look within there and leverage the relationships around me, and to really, well, let me kind of pivot here. I also really embrace the servant leader kind of model, where I'm really, even with my employees that report to me, or really, if you ain't got to be my employee, if you're interacting with me, the question I'm really asking is, right, in our relationship, how can I serve you, right? How can I minister to you? How can I make sure that I am meeting your needs, helping you to advance your overall goals, your overall development, and so that we can ultimately accomplish what we're here to accomplish, which is the betterment of society with respect to public health, ministry, souls, soul saving, etc. And so I try to embrace that particular mindset as I balance, or as I navigate relationships within my professional and personal life.
That's awesome, man. I mean, I can't say it enough. It's awesome. Talk about, you know, the sacrifice and the struggle of being a parent and being a leader of the home and having to sacrifice. What was that like? You know, I know you leaned on faith, but what did you feel? What did you think? And what would you give advice to others on how to get through?
Man, priority setting. For me, I tell people that um, one thing that really, one thing that did it for me is when I moved from West Baltimore to East Baltimore. And so I grew up in West Baltimore, kind of left all of the stuff behind, had a new change of scenery, right? And so, um, and so for me, having to manage a family and having to manage school and work, ministry, it was really about priority setting. So putting some things behind me that's no longer a priority, and begin to focus on those things that are priorities. So your kind of your schedule becomes very succinct and very clear. And so I also learned how to turn the TV off, right? And so I learned how to, yeah, again, put aside things that weren't a priority. So it was a long period of time in my life. I call it during the wilderness years, where for me it was really about waking up, making sure my kids make it to school on time, going to work, picking them up, going to class, right? Well, actually picking them up, giving them snack, doing homework, going to class, right? Bathing them for bed and then studying. Like that's what it was about when I was a single dad. That was my day for, man, I don't know, 5 or 6 years. Like that's all I was doing. And then there was a point where um, God brought me a wife, and so I inserted, or we were dating or courting during that time, until I inserted her into my schedule because she became a priority. But not only that, she became a beneficial priority because she was able to help me with my children. And then once I got married, it was like, oh man, I got a helpmate right here. And so things began to begin a little bit easier. So that was a good portion of time where I was just, again, waking up, getting the kids ready for school, dropping them off, going to work, picking them up, feeding them snack. And once that is done, I I do homework with them, feed them, go to class, do my homework, and just do that cycle over and over again. So just staying focused on my priorities because I knew the end goal was ultimately that I knew my purpose, and my purpose was kind of to get where I am at today, and I'm still shooting for additional things that the Lord has in store for me in the future. So I'm constantly assessing my priorities and time managing that, and really leaning on my family for support.
I mean, that's awesome right there. I mean, as especially with the purpose piece, just kind of knowing where you want to go, and just even though when you get there, understand that there's still something else for you to do, because oftentimes we get to a certain point and we become comfortable, and we become, kind of like we become comfortable and stagnant. It's like, all right, I made it, I'm good, I don't need to go nowhere else. But to have the idea to the desire and the wherewithal to say, all right, I reached this point. This was just another mark, but there's something else more for me to do. Is definitely a major enlightenment and just kind of major, help to, somebody who might be hearing it. Like, hey, you got to get to a certain point, but even when you get to that certain point, it's always something more that you can kind of branch off and do. And just that whole purpose piece is something that we struggle with, I believe. And this is my personal, it's something that we struggle with as African American men, because for so long we will find purpose in everything else, until we get to a point where it's like, oh, I'm 40 years old and I'm still trying to figure out my purpose. It's never too late. You can still find it. You just had some learning experiences to lead you up to that point.
Right.
But I think the more we can get to see individuals like ourselves to kind of shift that mindset and just saying like, oh, this is all I got, this is all it's going to be. But to shift it to say there's something more for me, I have a purpose out here. Then that's how we can kind of shift a culture and just kind of change the dynamic that we see on a day-to-day basis. So I appreciate that.
And let me, and I'll also just say that being or not being complacent does not necessarily mean that I'm a worker at an organization, and I don't have no desire to be a supervisor or a manager, so I'm just
Mm-hmm.
kind of chill right here. Well, you know what? There's additional progress that you can make as a worker, even if you don't want to be a supervisor or manager. Like, what
Absolutely.
more can you contribute to your role as a worker, even if you're okay with doing that for the next 20, 25 years? That's fine. We're not saying that everybody is called to be a supervisor, manager, or director, or owner, or CEO. But as a worker within your role, what more is there additional purpose that you can find within that particular role so that we can contribute to whatever our occupation or our particular role is? I think that's also important to mention because I don't want people to sit up to listen and say, well, I don't have no desire to run the organization, so I'm fine just chilling right here.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's more within that particular role that I think that we can offer, that we contribute. We kind of just do that introspective look, and then I think we can find that within.
Man, you speaking to me, man. You are ministering to me. In so many ways. I always say, being patient and not complacent. Um, but it's such a fine line you walk in, and talking to you is reminding me of that regiment that I need to get back to, and things that I need to do. And man, there's such a lack of research in higher education, specifically, that speaks to the journey of a brother like yourself or myself, or like D, that have pursued graduate degrees with a family, etc. And man, I mean, if this didn't come on time, I don't know what is, because every night and day when I get everything done, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna get back to my proposal, and come 11 o'clock, I'm slumped in the chair,
Mm.
haven't done a thing. You know what I mean? So to hear, I think to hear your journey and saying it took me that long to do my undergrad and I stuck with it and here I am. I think I know for me, you are hitting so many things that are so important, and it every time I come on here, man, it's just a blessing to run into brothers like yourself, and to that aspect saying everybody not going to be the boss, and but what is your purpose that you find in yourself and what you're doing, and that's so humbling, man. Wow, I couldn't ask for anything better.
Absolutely, man. Education is education for Black males like us who grew up in the inner city of Baltimore was really like all we knew. I know for me, like I didn't really know too much about being an entrepreneur or anything else. Man, today I realized that, hey, you know what? There are some things that I probably could have done that I didn't realize. But nowadays, with the access to the internet and all the information that we have available to us, we can couple our education, whether or not we choose to get a PhD or not, but we can couple our education. I mean, just getting a certificate is
Mm-hmm.
critical, right? Something I'm talking to my 19, 20-year-old son right now about is, man, warehouses are good. Trust me. I'm not trying to knock nobody for working at a warehouse. But if you understand your purpose and your potential, go after that. Right? If you choose to work at a warehouse, that's fine, but there's purpose and potential for you right there. And that's the point I was just emphasizing this and just mention that we want to make sure that within our current role in which we occupy, how can we continue to find within us an additional drive to make sure that we are maximizing our purpose and our potential. And for me, I'm talking to my sons and my wife. We talk to our sons about that all the time. Is how can we achieve as Black males our ultimate uh, gifts and abilities and not settle for 13 hours an hour,
Mm-hmm.
right? That or $11 an hour, which is minimum wage, and which kind of goes to some of the stigma and racism and things that they want us to ultimately. That's what they want us to do. They want us to stay at $11 an hour,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's how they try to. That Amazon want us to keep getting paid 18 hours an hour to deliver all their packages instead of us finding out, hey, how can we own our own business to hire other people to pay them 18 hours an hour? How can we find out an entrepreneur opportunity where we're making $40 an hour, right? And so these are the things we have to continue to kind of think about, reassess in line with our purpose.
Absolutely. You touched on, I do want to touch on this because I've been dealing a lot with this emotional intelligence. Um, I want to touch on that because I feel like we don't really talk about that a lot, and we need to have it in order to succeed because it helps guides us to reaching that purpose and setting those priorities. So I want you to kind of explain emotional intelligence and what it means to you and how it has helped you in your journey.
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess I'm going to start off with going back to the example that I said, just in case someone may join the podcast a little bit late and didn't hear what I said.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, my kind of one of my jobs early in my career, my mentor, when I was working at a hospital, he brought me to his office because I was having some emotional intelligence issues of myself
Mm-hmm.
early in my career. Man, I remember this. I remember in undergrad at Coppin. Man, this was when my second stint. This was back when I was into my second stint, trying to get out of school.
Mm-hmm.
And I was doing my thing. I was studying hard. I was getting good grades compared to previous. I had one of my professors, a black lady. She pulled me up after class, and she said, "You look like you stepped straight off the block." And I was shocked because, man, I'm getting all A's in her class. Like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
doing my thing. Like, I'm headed for success. And she told me I look like I stepped straight off the block. And that's when I realized that the image that I portray as a black man is critical,
Mm-hmm.
which also has to go with my emotional intelligence. When my supervisor or the CEO of a hospital pulled me in his office and said, "I hire people for their skills. I hire them for what they know, but I fire people for their behavior," which means is that our relation, how we interact with people, knowing what to say, when to say it, right?
Mm-hmm.
The type of attitude or persona that we have when we interact with people, our demeanor, right? How we course correct perhaps subordinates or employees or our colleagues. So all of these things matter when we talk about our emotional intelligence or our social skills. The words that I use, the choice words that I use, when to use them, how I respond. Some things don't require a response.
Mm-hmm.
Some things may just require us to sit and listen and say, okay, that's fine. If I have to correct a colleague about something that they said to me that's inappropriate, I have to make sure I'm doing that in a respectful, gentle, kind manner, because especially as a black male, because as a black male, when you encountering especially females of other races, white females, Caucasian females of other races, black men, we can perceive to be intimidating, right? And that
Mm-hmm.
that kind of goes to what my professor was telling me when she said I look like I stepped straight off the block. I look like I was pretty much. I mean, I'm from West Baltimore. I'm just doing my thing at cop and trying to make ends meet. And I'm realizing that, hey, how a female perceives me is going to be critical. So I may need to shave a little bit, especially in the settings that I frequent in my public health space. It may require me early in my career to shave. Right now, I don't mind growing a beard. I look rough because, I mean, my credentials speak for me now, and so I can grow something right
Talk
now. I'm going
about
to
it. Talk
save that
about
for
it.
my 40s, but early in my career, middle of my career, a clean face was important because it looked, the perception that I gave, coupled with my emotional intelligence for how I communicate with individuals, I realized that that was critical for me ultimately to continue to achieve and be successful and ultimately accomplish what God has set out for me to accomplish. And so emotional intelligence, social skills, being aware of how we interact and communicate with individuals, the words that we utilize, our demeanor, our disposition, our tone, all of these things matter because if, again, as I mentioned earlier, if you nasty, people don't want to work with you. They always saying you hostile. You don't know how to talk to them. Like, they're gonna get you out. They're gonna find a way to get you out of there. They're gonna
Mm-hmm.
find a way not to promote you. They're gonna find a way not to give you that contract. They're gonna find a way to not do something. And so that's very key.
Man, I mean, I had to give kudos to my co-host, man, and the network of people, because every time, I think this brother has found somebody, um, not saying one person is, outshining another, man, but I mean, there's some dynamic brothers that, are in your network and now my network, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
it's amazing, man. I mean, you hit on it. It couldn't be said any better. I mean, it's amazing, man. It's amazing. And if no one has told you, just meeting you for today, you have inspired, empowered, anybody listening to this is gonna take so much wealth from that, man. And keep doing your thing, man. Keep doing your thing. Your Dunbar guys, man. I don't know. I don't know about that. You know, I don't know about that piece. Somehow we seem to keep getting you guys, you people on here. But
Yeah,
man, it's awesome, man. It's just awesome.
We're the
yeah.
best of the best. That's all that matters.
Yeah. I'm not from here, you know, so I don't feel no kind of way. But I mean, it's starting to become a thing, man. I'm just saying.
Listen, I'm just using my network. That's all. Using my network.
That's awesome, man.
But man, Chris, I want to Dr. Rogers. Let me put some respect on your
Yes,
name.
yes, indeed.
put some respect on your name, Dr. Rogers. I want to thank you, man, for coming on and blessing us and just kind of sharing your background, a little bit about your history, and just like your educational journey, and the things that you're doing as far as ministry and in the public health sector. Just want to say thank you, and we really appreciate you sharing your story, and just joining us here on Unapologetically Black Male. Before we close out, just want to kind of say thank you to everyone who's listening. Thank you for chiming in. Thank you to my co-host, Brother EJ Stewart. Thank you to our sponsors, J Pope and Associates, and thank you, Dr. Rogers, for joining us again for this interview. Once again, you can follow us on social media outlets. Continue to stay tuned as we air every Monday at noon and 7 p.m. So make sure you check out all our episodes. You can follow. You can also download the episodes on Spotify and Anchor. So once again, thank you for joining us here at Unapologetically Black Male, where we're surviving the stigma, standards, and system. Y'all have a good day.